very happy to be here with these amazing writers. Let me see. I've been writing a book where every poem is about the stars. And it turns out to be a kind of theme and variation. And these are two poems newly finished. The first one is more like a theoretical poem, and the second one is more like a story. I'm going to read the 4 sections of the first one, and I'll read 4 sections, which is the whole poem of the second one. This one, one of the subtopics is fatigue. Can you hear me in the back? You can rise to a level of not knowing that's untouched by entropy. Out of uncertainty, openness, order is maintained. You rise to a realization beyond decay. There's a deeper intelligence than that. It radiates like light across a border between the elemental world and the body, unifying them. Your physical body and your body of quanta, probabilities, are like 2 candles on a table. Space between them evenly fills with photons of light. No separation at the particle level. You carry one candle outside and hold it up to a background of stars. Space between candle and a star fills with waves that bind them, each stars as connected to your candle as inside. Look at your candle, then look at Sirius. Photons from each hit your retina, discharging electrochemical flashes. You are another flame or star in the surrounding interconnected field. Yet, what is the structure of this interconnectedness? The field is your light and not knowing simultaneously, where the light is local or physical. You observe dimensions according to the consensus on entropy. You don't see the unifying factor in all things. You can't perceive the enfoldment of chance and fatigue. The time sequence is also enfolded. Your present state may not relate to the previous one, but to a more fundamental structure, like a pool of widening rings from a stone. This moment cuts through the physical universe now and seems to hold all of space in itself. What happens today can be altered by an event in the future. Since space consists of ambiguous, foggy regions where a particle may pass through or be expected to arrive on your last day. Awareness creates the duration you experience. You hurry with time sickness. Try to divide duration. It's like suddenly passing a gold blade through the flame. You divide space you think time occupies, not motion. Imagine duration as non-inferential time, change, and freedom from the decay inevitably implied. You observe creative emergence. A growth sequence indicates intelligence of the universe as a whole. In space you measure as your heartbeat or hormone level allowing. new content at every moment. The body or a galaxy requires continuous energy to maintain, like a whirlpool in a running stream. The patterned flow persists through time, though water constantly moves in and out. A standing wave of photons comprises the imminent grid of starlight that permeates space, vice versa, emanations from Earth, the Sun, your nervousness and emotions radiate out. You observe this enigmatic darkness, where every point contains intersecting photons from every star, past and present. Zero-sum, immense creativity streams in and out of you, gyre of light as intelligence or intent to observe. The observation is grainy. People, dogs, trees are like mosaics, crystalline lattice of interacting bits, each one deciding countless times per second whether to leap to the next point in time. Light so activated, composed our bodies in the process of coalescing, outcrops of growing infinite fields. Nurture the belief that your body's infused with the deep intelligence of this information, whose sole purpose is to sustain you. Add to 4 dimensions, inner space of mind consciousness, the virtual where future is a grid of possibility. All objects are connected, for example, by meaning in hyperspace. Our plans for the future exist as images, and these cognitive structures are also in hyperspace, since mind is more like a spatial concept. What we call star lines, like ley lines, are the interconnectivity here. There's no need to decide what's true. Reality's a learning curve. Then he tells me about his images of stars and galaxies. He projects himself into space, taking with him a 35mm camera. He puts the lens to his forehead and photographs the sun, moon, Milky Way, and Andromeda. He has many boxes of these photographs. To commune, deepest process of space evolves toward more connectedness as complexity. When I look at the night sky, I connect inner space with heaven, plasma streaming across boundaries. Time is not black space of light traveling, more like an ether. We perceive in the now the collapse of the wave into self-knowing by the cosmos. Consciousness embodies the cosmos by acting self-referentially, not dualistically, as in seeing, not seeing. Through emotional attraction, mass affinity, tachyonic time, know that bodies and radiance are interwoven, which you call originary, but it's instant. This is a sequel of a poem I wrote about 10 years ago called The New Boys. You may find at the market a casual comment swerves into conversation that's deeply metaphysical with a young man by produce. He wears a white tee and jeans, ordinary and careful about his food. Every time I meditate, I begin in space among the stars, he says. There's a lot of dialogue here. I'll try to. Many of these beings, he continues, are not physical 3D creatures. It's frustrating to describe them. I have the impression their silver color comes from within. They look at me with tremendous love from almond-shaped eyes. There's no sunlight. The whole cloud structure is luminous and the ground crystalline. I remember purple and blue like twilight. It's a complex and partly inarticulate narrative, perhaps because he feels I won't believe him. I don't need to question the reality of his story. He's sincere. There's more energy now as heat, connectivity, radio waves, data, X-rays, and all kinds of interactions. We operate with higher electrical currents inside us. It can rejuvenate you physically by the nature of connectivity, which moves freely around the body. The next week, smiling mid-sentence, seeing the earth from deep space, blue and alive. More often now, ETs are discussed at the co-op. Also, coincidence, spirit molecules, time tunnels, and non-locality, since we're close to the Santa Fe Institute. I like that he expresses himself to me as a kind of witness in transition. He's read my work and thinks me more knowledgeable than I am, since my poems aren't true. Pleiadians create new visuals through which I can imagine. My care is required for witness to resonate energetically with listener, however nonchalant I appear. The more compassion one has for non-normal experiences of others, the sooner consciousness will shift toward the stars. To him, this means shifting the ethical structure of communicating a narrative. I think of myself in a service capacity. One silvery insect is 7 feet tall. I shake his claw and we converse. Sometimes reptiles hoard crystals to send and receive information. They can space travel a version of themselves to here, often as snakes. Lipids in membranes behave like that. They're fluid ladders channeling atmosphere. At home I write, the membrane is like a liquid crystal to the sky. Next week in line, he's with a beautiful woman with a worn face who knows me. She's not well and she wants me to visit them and their animals. Animals know they don't end when they die, she says. It's sad they're leaving, but it's voluntary. They've relatives on other planets, sentient beings with the right to vote. Often my own toy poodle can help with problems on my website the technicians can't fix. Have you ever watched an animal and suddenly it disappears? He chips in. Witnessing more than perceiving. involves an idea of significance equivalent to truth. The whole idea of visiting another planet, communicating with a being from another world, to me, that's spiritual. When they speak, they subtly vary certain sounds. I hear the words, but their sound carries different meaning to my body. Use these new words enhanced by your imagining to allow our dimension to emerge. Imagination stabilizes such shifts. In Santa Fe, in Tucson, Lima, La Paz, people see extraterrestrials. When I step out, a velvety multitude of moths and insects, transparencies on my screen door whirl up to the porch light. Milky Way shines 3D with white cloudings and dark rifts, covering the ground and trees with phosphorescence. Comets, asteroids from deep space, planets moving at will, contribute to this glamour of wonder. He shows me how to pull frequency, starlight, down through the body into the ground, and I try it. I'm more open now. I can carry more light, which fuses with similar energies in mass consciousness. Earth will radiate this consciousness as a star or sun on horizons of his other worlds. Let us hold that portal open for you in the form of your little crush on him, of light filtering down, and feel a surrounding new ideal. Now imagine yourself in the Pleiades. You wish to give a present to the source, like compassion or rainwater from home. Early on, I divined that this book already exists in the future. After all I'd thought of it, it's a probability somewhere complete on a shelf. My intention is to seek that future edition and consult it to create this one, the original, for you.
Please welcome Delia Field.
Thanks, everyone. I also want to welcome up with me my friend who is a writer, performance artist, and installation artist, Crystal Gondrud. So in celebration of New Directions, we are going to read from Bird Lover's Backyard. We're going to read a piece that can fit in this time that we have together. So we're going to read a piece called Crossroads. The book does mostly engage essays that, well, sort of lyric essays that speak about animal-human relationships and the kind of stories we tell, and the echoes and sort of consequences of those kinds of stories. In some ways, this piece is a little bit of an outlier in the book, although it does, it reverberates sort of in the context. Crossroads. Chapter 1. Always start by saying that this is not a ghost story. Cozy and protective as such stories were, they were only fun at first. Like nuns besieged by poltergeists who tickled them near to death. That's cute. That old-fashioned ghost, detonated in shallow seas, continues a plague of faceless moments. But this is not a ghost story, because experiments have begun to show that bad deaths don't stay local. We've run out of romance in haunting an attic. Rumor is an old technique. Rumor kept things local. That's no longer possible.
Chapter 1. There are diets of sleep, lunacy, and visitations of people from wherever beyond settled across the river, once named Lethe, either an island or the land of the Cimmerians. There are diets and deities. Morpheus, say, twin of death, son of sleep and night, thousand-brothered, bringing up old friends and strangers at the most unexpected times, entwined with his brothers, including Phobeter and Phastasis. They confuse us with animals and things, light and water, smoke and steam, confuse us so that we lose animals and things when they decay, so we think we are not animals and things. We are not sleeping when we see these loved ones, lost as they are, or we are, in a world rotting. We are not sleeping because we experience unique visitations from the dead without confusion. Confusion says there's a map to follow, a near death of islands and territories different than the skin on our faces, and that, in decomposing, crumbles into smaller parts. An ocean of skin exposes the formless creativity of byproducts exploding in the water just a few miles out. How different are we from things that have died? Purple-haired Morpheus confuses us with the forms of people, as Ovid tells us, their gestures and perfect pitch. In sleep they give advice or orders. Sleep is the tenuous bridge controlled by these brothers. Don't let anyone cross. Green-skinned Morpheus mimics the exact words and faces of loved ones and rewards loss with radioactive dissipation, loss unleashing bigger energy. Such were William Blake and his ghost brother Robert, out at sea beyond mind-forged manacles, drifting into the mind's life-flushed expanse of acid, images in relief, without slavery, without kings. How, William Blake, will you illuminate the relief etching discovered in the hoarse throat of the dead?
Chapter 1. Picture the isolation and small size of Bikini Island, with children taking their hand luggage and evacuating, 167 souls in all. Now the island's for skin and scuba diving. The skin, a Bravo crater, now a tourist hole. Bikini Island vaporized into an attractive model for the sensitivity of biota, an important subject for studies of extinction. In the years since the war, I have pursued the origin of island biotas, dispersed and in situ, and the hate toward these biotas since contact. What in these cases isn't depauperate and disharmonic, facilitating the disappearing relic taxa and simulating adaptive radiations? Fancy words. Operation Crossroads. The restricted range and small population size of children, together with their limited diversity of defenses, makes them particularly vulnerable to extinction, largely through habitat loss or interactions with pigs and dogs. But I'm not trying to sound cranky. I might be in favor of tourists diving to see the sunken aircraft carrier in Bikini Harbor, along with the one Japanese flagship, 2 submarines, 1 battleship, 2 destroyers, and 1 frigate. I'm one of the lucky ones still with skin. On the island, it's 70 off years later, and the radiological cleanup has still not begun. 56 original children wait to go home, unsettled on other islands. Experts want to scrape the topsoil and store it in Bravo Crater, or spread potassium in the hopes that plants won't drink in the poisonous cesium still deep in the surface. Bikini may never support life again.
Chapter 1. Stand on the bridge between lung and matter, on a boat, handled by Chiron, between stalling and starting. Bacteria, we know you as you wiggle in our thoughts, a compass in the head leading the spoil. The scroll, Proverbs 8:27, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depths, this compass, the man, in his ignorance of the world, heaping around him agony and ecstasy, his narrow experience, a wiggle he defines by ignoring bacteria, even as they evolve under his tongue. Okay, that's not quite true. William Blake couldn't have known these things about small bacteria and atoms, that they could pass between large mortal barricades. But William Blake couldn't decide which was worse, to read the scroll and stare at the compass, or punish the sins and steer without stars, or the third way, to fall into transformed parts, give up these choices and become a deity, a rot diet. There is only me to eat, and there you are, said William Blake, saintly heretic. Proverbs 8:36, all they that hate me love death. In the loss of a brother there vibrates a yellow-green border. Brother slips on the fetid mud of the shore, coin in hand. We all lose brothers between fingers and clowns. Clouds. Oh, clowns is good too. Angels he thought he saw writhing in a tree become angels he knew. They came unexplained and unscientific. Roots imagine a compost. There is no philosophy in the material, but endless material. In other words, entropy is kept low because there is something outside us to take our trash. This is more than a clever game. Brothers who have died provide a thin, vulgar layer that supports life. In the radioactive, there is energy bent in the wrong direction and new loss. But there's a story that will steer the dead backward toward us, or grant access to the dark matter between plants, thoughts, the atmosphere which allows travel or transference between orbiting masses. Dead brothers are as common as death, and what's not to love in death?
Chapter 1. For the children it was impossible to wait as children. They slept in the boat, so to speak. Drifting made them tall with muscle growth and new bone shapes. If the system has a larger system to take from and a way to shove its residue back out, we can survive our own toxicity, middle and old ages. Other islands just close enough to hear information in the noise. But loving death, the children are told, is to lose your face, your name, your bigness. To love death is to love all that is given up form. The neighboring islands look similar but not familiar. If it has nowhere to live, get it from the house. Some trash sinks and washes up, no one on earth to love it.
Chapter 1. Ghost, a faint image near the image intended, caused by radiation that has taken a different path or by ideas that have changed and grown darker. Ghost, the decay and decomposition of imagination for all purposes, still living flesh.
Chapter 1. I was a doctor when I returned from Bikini. Now I'm nothing more than a coated surface, contaminated with invisible effects. Nothing scrapes off. The young, innocent sailors tried their best to distract me as they lounged and swam and played on the twists of ruined ships. A few months later, they returned home, freaked out that old-fashioned elbow grease couldn't compensate for cleaning products too weak to help. The invisible pollutants made little boxes click each time the spacemen approached us in the hospitals, the poor boys dressed head to foot in lead suits, afraid to touch my naked chest without their gloves. No one will forget how they lined up hundreds of old ships in the harbor, roped together like the sheep and goats to the decks. I was a senior medical officer then, but for the past 50 years, I've been nothing but a receptacle for secrets people think no one will believe. I'm amazed how well they're guarded and how they passed silently through generations. There is no appeal to so-called natural law for the shadowy visitors who pull their strange experiences from inside breast pockets and stuff them back if you cough or say so much as, "Excuse me." First one, then several, now 9 women in tailored jackets have come to my door this September. One young woman told me of hearing her dead father's voice explaining the principle of the wind, and now every time I go to type her file, the gust blows the papers around, so I've still not been able to complete it. Chapter 1. How many dead brothers does it take to resolve mythology? Morpheus, parented by night and sleep, is responsible for the way change resists yet restores false families. There's a reason ghosts are not vampires. Vampires need changing and overlapping forms. Ghosts must speak through symbols, symptoms. Chiron, Morpheus's half-brother, captains the endings. Neither ghosts nor vampires will step in the boat. My dead brother was dead as he killed a man on a beach in France. He killed the man, and he too was killed in time by staring into the sun. The brother's death is the echo of our father's death, which allows the story to give itself blind spots. I saw my dead brother on a long stay in Normandy. He was full of guilt he couldn't shake. Foregrounded, I suddenly went the other way, from a pitiful student to a doctor full of hope, believing I could change children back into children. But they are exiled on their scattered islands now, and refuge is lost to them, though they are refugees. In refuge, they will learn some of suffering, and that only a new classification of life will bring them a place to live. There will be plants that restore their island's soil. Responding to death takes cleaning up toxins, and amazingly, there are life forms that will accomplish this.
Chapter 1, aerodynamic proverb. Everything has an end, except a flying saucer, which has neither a beginning nor an end.
Chapter 1. 13 years, I nearly sang these words as I rustled papers near the window. Yes, William Blake, that's a good number. Dusting off the cover of a little chapbook, the one I started years ago, I searched the loose clippings until I found a Xerox letter written by William Blake to a friend on the occasion of a death. To the rhythm of the steady clicking, I read his words. 13 years ago, I lost a brother, and with his spirit I converse daily and hourly. I hear his advice, and so on. I am the companion of angels.
Picture a naked man bent ecstatically backward as he descends dark stairs, his muscular body in perfect condition, his face hidden. A star with a burning tail shoots through the picture, entering the man's right foot at the top. The comet is Milton. It is with the right foot that one steps into the spiritual world. Also, on the image, a printed word, the name Robert. This is the illustration of William's brother as he appeared to William in spiritual form. Blake has watched his brother die from tuberculosis. Together they had started the printing shop, but William got frustrated with the work. Without Robert, he continued unsuccessfully until Robert's ghost visited and gave him new formulas for ink and binders, a new process of engraving, new modes of printing. The secrets changed everything William did and brought business. Normally the etchings carved into the plate, but Robert's ghost advised William to put the lines in relief, stand them out, and that color is not a point. The forms and lines must be strong. Ghosts use symbols rather than blood to talk. William Blake has always found ghosts in the company of trees or hayfields. He kept regular 9-to-5 hours so that ghosts inclined to visit would stop in without appointment. But what proof could he offer the scientists? I am trained in medicine, yet I remind myself what William wrote. Whatever the seer sees, he must see for himself alone. There can be no other eyewitness. Chapter 1. For William Blake, the copper plate was a cave. The cave was a planet receding apparent surface and a human animal circling the orbit, which is the freedom of a life of skin. What skin burns away and is infinite, the recess is a void. Poet and painter, what skin makes islands touch the ocean, the aggregate of beings making worlds inside beings swimming blindly inside each other, the recess which allows text and images to hover together. What contaminates and can't be kept off the barrier? What illuminates blood and mind both? Morpheus cannot stay on land, for the green lawn runs to sand and sea laps back the algae. Single-celled creatures and things which are only half alive confuse the laws of good and bad. They rage in our world in excess. Theirs is the palace of wisdom. What life is black and putrid? What doesn't die can't be a relief, can't be coiled in the bacteria's dream, where invention and destruction join. In death-loving diets, small forms mire in the spoon of carbons ripen the planet. Some bacteria can withstand radiation 1,000 times greater than what kills humans and most animals. These are still living as single islands in a flooding, burning, frozen home waiting to return.
Chapter 1. If this were a ghost story, precautions might be better taken. It was once believed that burying scandalous folks, murderers, pagans, suicides, at a crossroads would be the only way to get them in the ground. But it could also be true that carrying the dead to the crossroads and turning them around, creating a maze, or burying them facing down or the wrong way, then walking home by another route, all this might ensure that the ghost who felt unfinished with you couldn't follow and take up where he left off. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Susan Howe.
Thank you. Well, this is for New Directions, this reading. So I thought I would read from a new book of mine that isn't out yet, but they're publishing, I think this summer, or the spring, summer, whatever. And the book is called Depths. That's Debths. And so okay, can you hear me? Is that all right? So I'm going to read sections from, well, 2 of the poems in this collection, and that's what I'm going to read. Okay, so this is some from a poem. I wish it didn't have popping peas. Called Tom Tit Tot. Just a few pieces from that. Little monuments of paint inch a space of scrutiny at scattered marks and loop-off words from images born from their original source. History scattered to the full of a page. It was you, play in combats of the playground. There are those of us who, oh, the grows, leaf, sown. Variants of Tom Tit Tot, variants of Tom Tit Tot, Tom Tit Tot, under the cobwebs and in villages. Tom Tit Tot, tangible things. Variants of Tom Tit Tot, diffusion of stories. Variants of Tom Tit Tot, search out or else, here, there, or else between the polecat and the owl. Tom Tit Tot, tangible things. Tom Tit Tot, diffusion of stories out of a stark oblivion dissenter. Child cry from within a mountain while quieted it with these words, hush, morrow comes thy father, wind and home, bringing both, rushed, I have rushed. Ideas about names, baptism, unimportance with less precise reasons by rustics is children never thrive till though who, and that the night air thrill there the homeless souls of the unbaptized to barbaric ideas about names. A document. The parasitic involve a structure of layer, age placed on top of another, its other, as if to infinite portable ocean. And this is a series in the same book called Periscope. And it has an epigraph from Moby Dick, one of the most beautiful lines ever written. God's foot upon the treadle of the loom. Closed book. Who stole who away? Do brackets signify emptiness? Was it a rift in experience? Mackerel and porpoise. Was this the last of us? These tallied scraps float like glass skiffs quietly for love or pity and all that. What an idea in such a time as ours, picked among Pleiads. Mystical accidentalism for sound-hemmed naught in Knight's botanical glossary. Over unnamed cycles, see the rich on that rust heap. Once when the real world was our world in its nature to mind, our wood world. Threshold word, little hinge hope of bewilderment, its parchment, memory, sign. Each word may be six razzle rungs. It may be two places at once in the old secret escapades, a vault benediction for one lucky one under thimble thumb. Cobble on downward path, long story, renegade with silver money and latchbox. Plaint when then was then, at the leaf end of ciphers. Cross counterclockwise via cobbled childhood juvenilia to hobbled monosandalism. Choose one rugged, raggedy quatrain, its puppet pattern. A coverlet has drifted down in double compass with sled loom, as if it were patterned. Many shuttles, many treadles. That beam was only a straw. So long as one fact stands isolated and strange, one fact supported by no fact, would slipper counterclatter. I can spin straw by myself. If to sense you are alive is pleasant itself, or can be nearly so, if I knew what it is, I'd show it. But no, what I lack is myself. Come, lie down on my shadow. Being infinitely self-conscious, I sold your shadow for you, too. Let's let bygones be bygones. Dust to dust, we barely reach. You sit in our tent of belief and ask what to do with it. Faithful first, then frivolous. Half scientific, but good by guessing by sensation. You look at a flame. Is it orange within you or without you? In another poem, I'm in a perfectly black room with my eyes directed on this sheet of paper. To make a long story short, I will tell Baba Yaga in her tinsel hut to heal your hobble foot. Hut running on chicken legs. Achilles has his heel, what's left to a third-hand sightseer. Caves and rivers imagine having to bury yourself over and over, knock on wood. Telling the story of a man who is responsible for his own ruin and is inexplicably condemned to wander in a one-horse chair eternally around Boston, from which historical song he himself cannot free himself with a wave of his hand. Whither? Dusk friars, carrying tapers, blow farewell kisses to Peter Rugg, our missing man. But what's the use? He's skipping across rooftops. Let's be human. We can't carry the galoshes of fortune home. In the old days, I used to sit up late till an owl appeared. Negative infinity melodrama. I shall never forget you halfway, owl, shadow, marauder, how you flew over and over. To stagger and fall to the nether side of the hut, never to stand with your back to the forest. Because the hut, when it wants to, allegedly rushes this way, then that. Do you hear the clock lock? Just wait till I turn back. When stars are not so faint, and new astronomers assign numbers, one may count one other, and each secretly jot down in units and tenths for photometrics, other instant, infinitesimal arc predicates. A nearest, faint, ghost, alias. Setting sun, then Lethe, wherever fabled white swan Helios in our own time underground. In this second place, we think we only think we think, though our ghosts appear in mirrors. This side, I will show miniature network entanglements, comma, blessings, full stop, yours very. Half hesitation, semicolon, semicolon, yes, the sea lies about us, our tininess on earth as such. These quiet stars, each free intelligence sealed from us. Days and hours are blinds. These screens, these means. Each new extreme outvies each quickening after. After the millennium, a little before, at the brink, humming octaves with wild trills of magic and symbolic logic, a not being in the know. Thanks.
Please welcome Michael Palmer.
Thank you. Let's see if I'm getting this to the right place. I don't know. Does that look good? Okay. I thought, actually, I was originally going to read new work, but I thought then, other than a book party, yeah, other than a book party at New Directions in December, I had never read from this book in Manhattan. The Manhattan where I grew up about on 46th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue till the age of 15. And so this is my neighborhood. This bookstore was not here to my knowledge, but the library was. So that was my library.
It was on 46th between 5th and 6th.
It was?
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
over Rock Center.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So I'll read from The Laughter of the Sphinx. I'm not sure what the Sphinx is laughing about these days, and eventually I suppose we will find out what the joke is. Idiot Song. By permission of the sun, the Arctic chill descends in a teacup of storm, in a sentence the logician's fate, and poetry, an enemy of the state of things, by the roadside in a ditch or beneath a buckled bridge. Now it is our wounds that make love in the streets, wounds hastily dressed with vetiver and mint, while slender poplars bend amidst the violent winds. What is your name, mindless sun? What idiot song will mark your end? And the next one is, oh, no, not the next, let's see. Yes, the next one is a poem for a great Hungarian novelist, also published by New Directions, Laszlo Krasznahorkai. And we were happy to be the host of Laszlo a couple of years ago when he came out to San Francisco for a reading. And I wrote this shortly after he had left. For Laszlo K., the characters are the victims of the novel. They pay with their lives for our words. They fall between the pages in their silence, and we invent hounds to devour them. We invent worlds to swallow them. We pass sentence upon them. The hangman arrives with his silken rope, its infinite strands forming a circle without beginning or end, round as the wave's gray eye, rolling toward what sudden shore, unpeopled, yet teeming with watchful night fires. The laughter of the Sphinx. I'm going to the Rotterdam Poetry Festival in the end of May, beginning of June, I think it is. And they were asking me to give a talk there about the I, the first person, and my relationship to it in poetry, which is problematic at best. But I was looking through this book, and I think this is the only one where the I has any role at all. So, and whose I it is, though, I'm not sure. The laughter of the Sphinx. There are other eyes, too, here. The laughter of the Sphinx caused my eyes to bleed. The blood from my eyes flowed onto that ancient map of sand. Ridiculous as I am, often have I been drawn to such lands, rippling oceans of silence and the distant, enigmatic glow of burning shops and burning scrolls, overseen by river birds and mitred beasts, sad-eyed scholars and mournful scribes, omniscient ibises, and in the dust-clogged air, the laughter of the Sphinx, endlessly riddling, endlessly echoing, loosing the blood's engulfing tide. Isle of Dogs. There is an Isle of Dogs in the Thames, actually, which had some ancient settlements on it. On the Isle of Dogs we barked. We had our say from day till dark. A chorus we were of piebald hounds. Our howling spiraled out across the downs. We howled at the redness of light, bayed at the rising waters and approaching night. We lived on an island of sounds. None listened, none heard. The sounds were entirely ours. None listened, none heard, but we didn't care. As long as our howls shaped the still air, we lived on the Isle of Sounds. Trio, Paris, 1959. And at the Blue Note that night, Bud called pork chops and assholes. Bud Powell, in his sad late phase, playing the Blue Note when I was a young teenager, and that was his version of polka dots and moonbeams. Played beautifully. In elegy, parentheses, the mute Carter sings, when young we lived in a certain enveloping light, and things turned, it seemed, toward our eyes, as if coming to be, yet to see them again as if ourselves then, the quartzite stone, the blood pours through, how it pours silently through the bright stone. The pepper tree that speaks of lost meanings by a stream, meanings of speech, meanings of tree, what meaning to the stream? Wheels on the night path, sounding their way. The mute carter sings, my cart is full, my cart is empty, one and the same. The voices of children and dogs intermingling, the slender girls along the shore chanting the coming mysteries, the confounding mysteries of what is to be. In elegy, the mirror reassembling its shards. In elegy, memory embracing its shadows. In elegy, shadows refashioning the body. In elegy, the bell betraying the hours. In elegy, the page borne off by a breeze. The mute carter sings, we swallow the earth limb by limb. We pry open its head to peer in, cut out its heart, sever its sex, to dissect, to possess. The mute carter sings by night of such things along the way. His cart is full, his cart is empty, one and the same. Tomb of Aimé Césaire. I mourned a person who turned out not to be dead. Of that, what is to be said? Surgical noise of the city, sentence and song under earth. I wept for something lost, a dawn or a dusk or a thought, a thing that couldn't be bought. Sun, throat cut, woman removing a glove, and the body at once naked and veiled, waiting and waiting for what? Coma Berenices above the bay, sea rack beneath, speech of the bone and of the polychrome wing, speech of the leaf descending and of the rubble in a ruined field. Words have their lives apart. I mourned a person who turned out not to have died between a feral sky and a flooded shore where a wave was frozen in midair. Song. Festival night, we climbed the candle one last time. The wind from the west knows us best. We climb the candle one last time. Blood-streaked horses flare across the dream. They know us best who know us least. The waters rise as high as the flame. They are a test. And this text I live in is a difficult one, she mentioned in the dark as we spoke of syllables and suns and sightless horses on the run. Festival night, we climb a final time, and if it is a song, it is a song not to be sung. I just recently sent this book to a mutual friend, good mutual friend of Suki's and mine, Dominique Fourcade in Paris. And he just wrote back to me saying that this was the poem that is ringing in his ears at this point. So I thought I would read it. Poem, October, November 2013. It is true that we write with one eye toward dying. True that we write with a blind eye blinded by a shadow cast across the sun or by a fictive glimpse of the beloved. It is true that we do not write, that a measureless silence writes in our place of all it surveys and cannot say. The phosphorus rain, the lies of the prophets, the table set for dinner in a suddenly deserted house of stone. What wild storm swept them away? What thing unforeseen? Implements, full pitchers and plates, still carefully arrayed, as if an evening meal were always to come. It is true that as we write, our skin grows transparent, our bones brittle, and the words take leave of what they thought to mean. The scent of bay and mint lingers nonetheless by the scorched field's jagged edge, where, in the jagged moment, nothing's to be said. Well, I was not going to read this poem, which is a little bit anomalous in the book, but turned out to be prophetic. I first read it, I think, when my wife and I were in residence, Kathy Simon, the architect, and she was in residence. I was the husband coming along, really, at the American Academy in Rome. Wonderful couple of months the year before last, in November and December. A great experience. And so I was asked to give a brief reading along with a couple of other people, and I read this poem, and someone came up to me afterwards. Well, I'll read it and then explain. The falling down in America. Every 3 seconds, someone over 65 falls down in America. Our records show that you are over 65 and may therefore have already fallen down in America, maybe more than once. Perhaps upon entering your bath, you slipped and cracked open your skull and subsequently drowned in a pool of blood. If so, disregard this notice. Perhaps while gazing at the sea distractedly one day, your balance failed, and the waves carried you away toward the irradiated swells of Fukushima. If so, never mind. The flesh has already peeled from your limbs, and your eyes have melted in their sockets, in which case you should disregard this notice. We need hardly remind you that many of your friends and relatives, perhaps beloved uncles, aunts, cousins, your 7 brothers and sisters, parents assuredly, may have succumbed in some manner to the fateful equation of gravity and age. In addition, it is likely that your investments recently caved, and as a result, from the shock, you fainted upon the cheap Mexican tiles of your dining room floor, and days later awoke among impersonal professionals, masked and clad in white, and addressing you as if you were a child. If so, you now know that you are utterly alone in this life. Please favor us with a reply regarding our one-time offer, which will soon expire. I started sometime right like this, they say, clockwork, getting these phone calls from some vampires trying to sell me buttons to push when I started falling down. America the Beautiful, man. Okay. So I read this in Rome, and a person came up to me afterwards. Who was it that? Woody. Yeah, anyway, he said, you weren't here yet, but I fell down the tub. They had to take me to the emergency room, and he went through this whole rehabilitation thing, so he thanked me for the poem. And then I was going through 6 weeks, not that long ago, hellish lung problems, just unable to shake a virus that I'm just not getting over at this point. Anyway, I was completely debilitated. I tried to get up from the table. I was having shortage of breath, this bronchial monster, and I went to get my inhaler and fainted. This is a new scar down here. There I go to the emergency room. So we should be careful what we write, Susan. I mean, that's the answer. Et in Arcadia, or et in Arcadia, I guess you would say. It rained frogs. We were the frogs and the rain. As the planets fled their orbits, apples ripened in the orchards to our north. We bit into the planets as if they were apples. They crackled between our teeth, and their juices streamed off our jowls like syllables from childhood. Our mad brothers, mad lovers, mad others were already gone. The bees and their hexagons, their dances were gone. The whales and their songs. Shoeless we walked across the stellated, the glowing, irradiated meadows of glass. Have you always had this tremor, she asked. Yes. Okay, a couple more. This one's called The Republic, and reminded of it because we have a carousel here, and carousels have always, to me, had a strange kind of magic in it, and in some ways demonic life to them. And I think of these blind creatures fated to go around in a circle, much like us, until the music stops. The Republic is the name of, so I did some research on carousels. And the Republic was one of the names I came up with, and it seemed to resonate with our particular historical circumstance. The Republic. They bellow, these silent creatures, and of course, this is wonderful. It's one reason I asked, and graciously Susan Rothenberg accepted to allow us to do a cover of one of her extraordinary horses. That's partly as a result of this poem and some related ones. They bellow, these silent creatures of the carousel, these dragons and centaurs, unicorns and sea beasts, and always the horses, dappled, candy-striped, pure white. Their eyes are ablaze with what they cannot see, ablaze with the thoughts they cannot think. They cannot think of the spinning world in which they turn. They cannot hear the music they encircle, pouring from the pipes of the wheezing calliope, its melodies bent by the wind into the semitones of an unintended world. And the children, the wild children as they ride, laugh in their pleasure and in their terror at a slow dawning knowledge that the beasts will devour them. I'll read this one, just one more. It's called After. And of course it references Adorno's famous, it's barbaric to write poetry after Auschwitz, which was a, in its own way, much misunderstood but thoughtful comment, and he later retracted it, but it was a cautionary note about beauty, I guess. After. And to write a poem beneath a sickle moon is barbaric, and to trace a poem upon the lover's body is barbaric, and to write a poem amidst the dust storm of history is barbaric, and to read a poem, to read while the book is burning, and to enter the paper house while the streets are burning, to enter the paper house which is silent, and to hear the song, should we call it a song soonest gone, of the cicadas in the parching heat, when to drink of the lover's liquid is barbaric, and to wander in a dark wood, wander lost in a dark wood, to look and to begin to say farewell, to begin and to dwell upon, to dwell among. Thank you.